Evelyn Carter, a 75-year-old black woman, boards a flight from Atlanta to Los Angeles, expecting a quiet first-class trip. Instead, she's met with a sneer from flight attendant Lisa Hargrove, who mutters, "This isn't your seat," and forces her to the back of the plane. Evelyn complies, thinking it's a simple mix-up until the plane lands, and Lisa's smug grin vanishes as Evelyn's son, Nathan Carter, the airline's CEO, waits at the gate. What starts as a routine flight spirals into a nightmare of racism, with consequences Lisa never saw coming. How far will this go? Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from, and if you stand for justice against all odds, hit like and subscribe for more stories that expose the truth and fight the good fight. Evelyn Carter stepped onto the jet bridge at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport with the kind of quiet dignity that turned heads without trying. At 75, she carried herself like the civil rights lawyer she'd been for 40 years. Her silver hair swept into a neat bun, her tailored navy suit hugging her frame with crisp precision. She'd booked this first-class ticket to Los Angeles months ago, a rare treat after decades of fighting for others. And she savored the thought of sipping tea at 35,000 feet, the hum of the plane a gentle backdrop to her well-earned rest. Her polished loafers clicked softly against the metal floor as she approached the aircraft door, her boarding pass clutched in one hand, a small leather purse in the other. She'd flown this route before, knew the drill, expected the usual nod from the crew as she stepped aboard. But today felt different the moment she locked eyes with Lisa Hargrove. Lisa stood at the entrance, her blonde hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, her uniform starched to perfection, a name tag pinned over her heart glinting under the cabin lights. She was maybe 35, with sharp blue eyes that scanned Evelyn, like a barcode, lingering a beat too long on her dark skin, her silver curls, the expensive cut of her clothes. Evelyn extended her boarding pass with a polite smile, the kind she'd perfected over years of navigating rooms where she was the only one who looked like her. Lisa took it, her fingers brushing the paper with a deliberate slowness, her lips twitching into something that wasn't quite a grin. She scanned it, then froze, her gaze flicking back to Evelyn's face. "There's a problem," she said, her voice clipped, professional, but edged with something colder. "This seat's not available. We've had an overbooking issue." Evelyn blinked, her smile faltering. "I booked this months ago," she replied, keeping her tone even, her years of courtroom poise kicking in. "First class, seat 2A. I confirmed it this morning." Lisa didn't flinch, didn't check her tablet, didn't even glance at the empty first-class cabin visible just beyond the curtain. "Doesn't matter," she said, her words slicing through the air like a blade. "Mistakes happen. You're in economy now. Follow me." She turned on her heel, not waiting for a response, her ponytail swinging as she strode down the aisle. Evelyn stood rooted for a second, her pulse quickening, the familiar sting of dismissal prickling her skin. She'd faced this before, the casual assumption that she didn't belong, but this was bold, blatant. A slap in the face on a plane she'd paid to ride in luxury. She glanced around, catching the eyes of a few passengers boarding behind her, a mix of curiosity and indifference on their faces. No one said a word. With a deep breath, she followed Lisa, her loafers tapping a steady rhythm, her mind already turning over options. The plane was a Boeing 737, narrow and humming with pre-flight bustle. First class shimmered ahead, all wide seats and plush headrests. But Lisa didn't stop there. She marched past the curtain, into the tight grid of economy, where the air smelled faintly of stale coffee and the seats squeezed together like sardines in a can. She stopped at row 28, a middle seat wedged between a snoring teenager and a woman wrestling a toddler onto her lap. "Here," Lisa said, pointing, her tone flat, her eyes daring Evelyn to argue. Evelyn looked at the seat, then back at Lisa, her jaw tightening. "This isn't right," she said, her voice low but firm. "I paid for first class. There are seats up front. I saw them." Lisa's lips curled into a smirk, thin and sharp, like she'd been waiting for this. "Those are reserved," she snapped. "You're here now. Sit down, or I'll have you removed before we take off." The threat hung heavy, a power play wrapped in a uniform. and Evelyn felt the weight of every eye in the cabin turning her way. She could have fought harder, could have demanded the captain, but she knew how this worked. She'd seen it in courtrooms, in restaurants, in every corner of a world that still flinched at her presence in certain spaces. Pushing back now might get her thrown off, and she needed to get to LA. So she sat, easing into the narrow seat, her knees brushing the tray table, her purse clutched tight against her chest. The teenager's elbow jabbed her side, the toddler's wails pierced her ears, but she kept her face smooth, her breathing steady. Around her, passengers settled in, some stealing glances, others whispering behind cupped hands. "Can you believe she thought she'd stay up there?" a man muttered 2 rows back, his voice carrying just far enough. "They let anyone buy those tickets now," a woman replied, her tone dripping with disdain. Evelyn didn't turn, didn't react, but her fingers tightened around her purse strap, her nails digging into the leather. Lisa lingered nearby, adjusting a luggage bin, her smirk still plastered across her face. She thought she'd won, thought she'd put Evelyn in her place, thought this was over. Evelyn let her think it, let her bask in that petty triumph, because Evelyn wasn't done. She'd spent a lifetime turning slights into strategies, and this was no different. As the plane's engines rumbled to life, she pulled her phone from her purse, her movements slow and deliberate, her thumb hovering over the screen. Nathan's name glowed in her contacts, her son, the one person Lisa wouldn't see coming. She typed a quick message, her words sharp and to the point. "Flight attendant forced me to economy. First class was empty. Name's Lisa Hargrove. Handle it." She hit send, the screen flashing confirmation as the plane taxied toward the runway. Lisa glanced back, catching Evelyn with the phone, her smirk faltering for a split second before hardening again. She thought it was nothing, a futile gesture from an old woman she'd already dismissed. She had no idea what she'd just started. The cabin lights dimmed as the plane climbed, the hum of ascent filling the air, a low vibration rattling the cheap plastic armrests. Evelyn leaned back, her suit jacket creasing against the worn fabric of the seat, her mind racing even as her body stayed still. She'd fought bigger battles than this, faced down judges and juries who'd sneered at her the same way Lisa did. But this cut deeper, sharper, because it was so small, so personal. A ticket she'd paid for, a seat she'd earned, snatched, away for no reason but the color of her skin and the assumptions tied to it. She closed her eyes, letting the toddler's cries fade into background noise, picturing Nathan's face when he read her text. He'd be in his office, 38, floors up in LA, his desk piled with papers, his jaw tightening as he processed her words. He'd act fast, she knew it, but she also knew this flight was just beginning. Lisa moved through the aisle now, her steps brisk, her posture screaming confidence. She paused near Evelyn's row, pretending to check a seatbelt, her eyes flicking over Evelyn with a glint of satisfaction. "Enjoying the ride?" she asked, her voice syrupy sweet, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Evelyn didn't answer, didn't give her the reaction she craved, just met her gaze with a calm that made Lisa's smirk twitch. The flight attendant turned away, sauntering back toward first class, her laughter floating behind her like a taunt. Evelyn watched her go, her heart steady, her resolve hardening. Lisa thought this was a game, a quick win to stroke her ego, but Evelyn had played longer, tougher matches. She'd sit here, cramped and ignored for now. But this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The plane leveled off, the seatbelt sign blinked off, and Evelyn settled in, her phone resting in her lap, the first move made in a battle Lisa didn't even know she'd joined. Evelyn Carter sat wedged in her economy seat, the damp stain of coffee still clinging to her slacks from the toddler's spill next to her, but her mind was razor sharp, cutting through the discomfort. The plane cruised at 35,000 feet, a steady hum vibrating through the thin walls, and she gripped her phone, the screen glowing faintly in the dim cabin light. She'd sent Nathan her text 20 minutes ago, and now she dialed his number, her thumb steady despite the chaos around her. The teenager to her left snored louder, his head lolling onto her shoulder, while the mother to her right wrestled her squirming child. But Evelyn tuned it out, pressing the phone to her ear. It rang twice before Nathan's deep voice crackled through, laced with concern. "Mom, you okay? I got your message. What's this Lisa Hargrove doing?" Evelyn kept her voice low, a whisper that carried the weight of decades in courtrooms. "She forced me back here, Nathan. Said it was overbooked, but first class is half empty. She's got an attitude I've seen too many times before." Nathan's breath sharpened on the other end. "I'm pulling the manifest now. Stay put. I'll handle it." She nodded to herself, trusting his word, and hung up, slipping the phone into her purse as the cabin lights flickered. Up in first class, Lisa Hargrove moved with the grace of a predator, her tray balanced with flutes of champagne, the golden liquid bubbling against crystal rims. She handed one to a white businessman in a pinstripe suit, her smile warm, her voice lilting. "Enjoy your flight, sir. Anything else I can get you?" He grinned, tipping the glass toward her, oblivious to the scene unfolding behind the curtain. Lisa's eyes darted toward economy every few minutes, a flicker of triumph in her gaze, certain she'd buried Evelyn in the back where she belonged. But Evelyn wasn't waiting idly. She raised her hand as Lisa passed by the curtain, her tone polite but firm. "Excuse me, miss. Could I have a glass of water?" Lisa stopped, her heels clicking against the floor, her head tilting as if Evelyn's request was a personal insult. "Water?" she repeated, her voice dripping with mockery. "We're serving up here right now. You'll have to wait." She turned away, her ponytail swinging, leaving Evelyn with nothing but the stale air and the stares of nearby passengers. The snub wasn't subtle, and it didn't go unnoticed. A few rows ahead, a white guy in a polo shirt twisted around, his brow furrowing. "Hey, she's been sitting there forever. Give her a damn drink," he grumbled, loud enough for Lisa to hear. She froze, her smile tightening, then spun back toward Evelyn, her eyes narrowing. "Fine," she snapped, grabbing a plastic cup from a cart and filling it with tepid water from a pitcher. She thrust it toward Evelyn, the liquid sloshing over the rim, splashing onto her lap. "There, happy now?" Evelyn took the cup, her fingers steady, her face a mask of calm. "Thank you," she said, her voice smooth, refusing to rise to the bait. But Lisa wasn't done. She leaned in close, her breath hot against Evelyn's ear. "You're lucky I even bothered," she hissed, just low enough that only Evelyn could hear. Then she straightened, smoothing her uniform, and strutted back to first class, her laughter floating behind her like a taunt. The businessman in polo wasn't the only one watching now. A young woman with braids across the aisle shifted uncomfortably, her phone halfway out of her pocket as if debating whether to record. Evelyn caught her eye, offering a small nod, a silent thank you for the flicker of solidarity. She sipped the warm water, her mind racing. Nathan was digging, but she couldn't sit here soaking in Lisa's venom. She flagged Lisa again as she passed, her voice cutting through the cabin noise. "I know your policy. First-class passengers get priority, but economy's entitled to basic service. I've been waiting an hour. What's the holdup?" Lisa stopped dead, her jaw tightening, her fingers curling into fists at her sides. The question wasn't loud, but it carried, heads turning, whispers rippling through the rows. For a moment, Lisa looked trapped, her authority challenged in front of an audience she'd assumed was hers. "You're right," she said, her tone forced, her smile a thin veneer. "I'll get you something. Sit tight." She stalked off, her heels pounding the floor, her retreat a small victory for Evelyn. Evelyn leaned back, her pulse steadying, a faint satisfaction warming her chest. She'd faced down worse than Lisa Hargrove, judges who'd smirked at her arguments, cops who'd sneered at her skin, and she'd outlasted them all. This was just another round, and she'd landed a punch. The young woman with braids gave her a thumbs up, a quiet alliance forming in the cramped space. Evelyn thought she'd bought herself some breathing room, maybe even turned the tide. She was wrong. Lisa returned minutes later, her tray loaded with coffee cups for a group in the next row, her movements deliberate, her eyes locked on Evelyn. As she passed, her elbow jerked, the tray tipping just enough to send a cascade of scalding coffee crashing onto Evelyn's lap. The liquid burned through her slacks, searing her thighs, and she gasped, jolting upright, the cup tumbling to the floor with a plastic thud. Passengers gasped, a collective intake of breath rippling through the cabin. The teenager woke with a snort. The mother clutched her toddler tighter, and the woman with braids shot to her feet, shouting, "What the hell was that?" Lisa spun around, her face a mask of fake surprise, her hands flying to her chest. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. It was an accident, I swear." Her voice was high, theatrical, but her eyes glinted with something darker, a glee she couldn't quite hide. Evelyn clenched her teeth, the pain sharp, her skin throbbing, but she didn't cry out, didn't give Lisa the satisfaction. She dabbed at the mess with a napkin from her purse, her hands trembling slightly, her suit ruined. "An accident," she repeated, her voice low, steady, cutting through Lisa's performance. "Funny how that keeps happening to me." Lisa's smile faltered just for a second before she doubled down, shrugging. "Clumsy me. I'll get you a towel." She sauntered off, her hips swaying, leaving Evelyn soaked and seething. The cabin buzzed now, passengers leaning into each other, their whispers turning to murmurs. "Did you see that? She didn't even trip," a guy in a baseball cap muttered. "That was no accident," the woman with braids replied, her voice shaking with anger. Evelyn sat back, the coffee cooling into a sticky mess, her mind spinning. She'd called Lisa out, forced her to back off, thought she'd won a skirmish. But this was war. Lisa hadn't just dismissed her, she'd attacked her, turned a petty slight into something physical, public, humiliating. Evelyn's phone buzzed in her purse, Nathan's name flashing again, but she didn't answer. Yet, she needed to process this, to plan her next move. Lisa thought she'd crushed her, thought the coffee was checkmate. She was wrong. Evelyn's resolve hardened, her pain fueling a fire that had burned in her for decades. This wasn't over, not even close. Hey folks, what do you think about this? Comment number 1 if you're raging at Lisa's dirty move with that coffee spill, because who wouldn't be? Drop a number 2 if you're cheering Evelyn's cool-headed clapback, holding her ground like a queen. Hit that like button if you're hooked on this fight for justice, and subscribe if you're ready to see how far this showdown goes. Evelyn's not backing down, and neither should we. Stick around, because the stakes are about to skyrocket. So, what's Lisa cooking up next after that scalding stunt? Will she slink away after Evelyn's pushback, or is she gearing up for something even nastier? How's Evelyn going to turn the tables when the whole plane's watching? Get ready, because the turbulence is just beginning. Evelyn Carter sat in her cramped economy seat, the coffee-soaked fabric of her slacks clinging to her thighs, the sting of the burn still pulsing beneath her skin. The cabin hummed with the low drone of the engines, a steady 35,000 feet above the earth, but the air around her crackled with unease. Passengers nearby stole glances, their faces a mix of pity and curiosity, while the young woman with braids across the aisle clutched her phone, her jaw tight with unspoken fury. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly as she dabbed at the mess with a crumpled napkin, but her expression remained granite, her eyes fixed on the seat back in front of her. She'd taken Lisa's hit, felt the scalding humiliation, and now she needed more than water or words. She needed leverage. With a slow, deliberate breath, she raised her hand again, her voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade. "I'd like to speak to a supervisor. Now." Lisa Hargrove, still hovering near the curtain separating economy from first class, froze mid-step, her tray of empty coffee cups rattling slightly in her grip. Her blonde ponytail swung as she turned, her blue eyes narrowing. But the weight of Evelyn's demand hung heavy, amplified by the dozen passengers now watching. She couldn't ignore it, not with the cabin buzzing, not with the stain on Evelyn's lap screaming louder than any complaint. "Fine," Lisa snapped, her tone sharp enough to slice through the tension. She disappeared behind the curtain, her heels clicking with a fury that echoed back to Evelyn. Minutes ticked by, the plane's hum filling the silence, and Evelyn sat straight, her silver hair catching the overhead light, her purse clutched tight against her chest. She'd faced worse than this, stared down men with gavels and guns, and she wouldn't flinch now. Not for Lisa. Not for anyone. The curtain parted again, revealing a new face. A man in his late 30s with a nervous tick in his jaw and a badge pinned to his chest that read, Mark led attendant. His brown hair was slicked back, his uniform slightly rumpled, and his eyes darted between Evelyn and the passengers like a deer caught in headlights. He approached her row, crouching slightly, his voice low and unsteady. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry about this. There's been a misunderstanding. We've got a seat for you up front. Please, come with me." Evelyn studied him, her dark eyes piercing through his flustered apology, sensing the crack in Lisa's armor. She nodded once, rising with a grace that belied the pain in her legs, smoothing her ruined suit as she followed him. The woman with braids whispered, "You got this," as she passed, a spark of solidarity igniting in Evelyn's chest. Lisa stood near the first-class entrance, her arms crossed, her lips pressed into a thin line as Mark ushered Evelyn past her. The plush seat stretched out ahead, half empty, the air cooler, cleaner, a world apart from the chaos of economy. Mark gestured to seat 2A, her original spot, and handed her a fresh napkin with a shaky smile. "Anything you need, just ask, I'll make sure of it." Evelyn settled in, the leather cool against her skin, her purse resting on her lap as she nodded her thanks. Mark scurried off, avoiding Lisa's glare, and Evelyn allowed herself a small victory sip from the coffee he'd brought, the warmth soothing her throat, the bitter taste a stark contrast to the scalding mess still drying on her clothes. She'd fought back, called Lisa's bluff, and won her seat. For a moment, she thought she'd turned the tide, reclaimed what was hers. She was wrong. Lisa lingered nearby, her posture rigid, her fingers tapping against her elbow as she watched Evelyn settle in. The triumph in Evelyn's chest flickered, dimmed by the venom in Lisa's stare, a promise of something worse brewing beneath her forced calm. The plane jolted suddenly, a sharp lurch that sent cups rattling and passengers gasping. The overhead, lights flickering as turbulence gripped the aircraft. Evelyn gripped her armrests, her coffee sloshing slightly, while Lisa seized the moment, her voice rising over the chaos. "See? This is what happens when people don't follow rules." She stormed toward the galley, her heels pounding, and seconds later, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, calm but stern. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've hit some unexpected turbulence. We've had reports of disruptive behavior in the cabin contributing to this issue. Please remain seated and calm." The words landed like a punch, passengers twisting in their seats, their eyes darting toward Evelyn in first class. A woman in a silk scarf whispered, "Was it her?" to her husband, who nodded, his brow furrowed. A man with a laptop muttered, "Figures," his tone thick with assumption. Evelyn's heart sank, her victory unraveling in real time. She hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, hadn't done a thing to cause this, but Lisa had spun it, twisted a natural bump into a weapon against her. The plane steadied, the turbulence fading, but the damage was done. Lisa emerged from the galley, her smirk back in full force, her eyes locking onto Evelyn's with a glint of triumph. She leaned in close as she passed, her voice a venomous whisper. "You don't belong here. Never will." Then she straightened, adjusting her uniform, and sauntered down the aisle, leaving Evelyn isolated in a sea of suspicious stares. The cabin settled into an uneasy quiet, the hum of the engines a dull backdrop to the whispers rippling through first class. Evelyn sat still, her coffee cooling in her hands, her mind racing. She'd demanded a supervisor, forced Lisa to back down, reclaimed her seat. And for what? A fleeting win, a hollow prize now tainted by Lisa's lie. The passengers' glares burned into her, their assumptions fueled by the captain's words, and she felt the weight of every courtroom battle she'd ever fought, every time she'd had to prove her right to exist in spaces others took for granted. This wasn't just about a seat anymore. It was about Lisa's need to erase her, to punish her for daring to belong. Evelyn's phone buzzed in her purse, Nathan's name flashing, but she didn't answer yet. She needed to think, to strategize, because Lisa wasn't done, not by a long shot. The air in first class grew thick, the scent of champagne and leather mingling with the tension radiating from every seat. Evelyn glanced around, catching the businessman in pinstripes staring, his flute paused halfway to his lips, his expression, a mix of confusion and disdain. The woman with the silk scarf leaned over, murmuring to her husband, her words too soft to catch but her tone sharp enough to cut. Evelyn kept her face neutral, her hands steady, refusing to let them see her crack. She'd won this round, forced Lisa's hand, but the victory tasted bitter, overshadowed by the lie now spreading through the plane like wildfire. Lisa had turned a moment of nature into a public accusation, painted Evelyn as a threat, and the crew was buying it. Mark shuffled past, avoiding her gaze, his earlier kindness replaced by a nervous distance. She was alone again, surrounded by luxury she'd fought for, yet trapped in a cage of suspicion Lisa had built. Evelyn set her coffee on the tray table, the liquid sloshing slightly, her fingers brushing the pearls at her throat. A habit from years of steadying herself under pressure. She'd thought calling for Mark would shift the power, force Lisa to retreat, but it had only sharpened her claws. The turbulence was a fluke, a random jolt, but Lisa had wielded it like a club, swinging it with precision to crush Evelyn's brief stand. The captain's warning echoed in her mind, a public mark against her, and she knew Lisa had planted it, convinced the crew she was trouble. Evelyn's chest tightened, not from fear, but from the familiar fury of being targeted, of having her dignity stripped away by someone who thrived on control. She'd won her seat back, yes, but Lisa had turned it into a battlefield, and the war was just heating up. Evelyn Carter sat in her reclaimed first-class seat, the leather cool against her damp slacks, the faint sting of the coffee burn still prickling her thighs. The plane cruised smoothly now, the turbulence a fading memory, but the air in the cabin hung heavy, thick with the weight of whispered accusations. Passengers stole glances, their eyes sharp with suspicion, the captain's intercom warning still echoing in their minds. Evelyn kept her posture rigid, her silver hair glinting under the soft lights, her hands folded over her purse, refusing to let the stares unravel her. She'd fought Lisa Hargrove's petty cruelty, won back her place, but the victory felt like sand slipping through her fingers. Lisa wasn't done. Evelyn could feel it, a storm brewing behind the curtain, and she braced herself, her lawyer's instincts humming beneath her calm exterior. Lisa moved through the aisle with a predator's grace, her blonde ponytail swaying, her uniform pristine despite the chaos she'd sown. She chatted with a passenger in row 4, her voice lilting, her smile a polished mask, but her eyes flicked toward Evelyn every few seconds, a glint of malice shimmering beneath the surface. Evelyn caught a snatch of conversation as Lisa passed. The galley, her voice low, conspiratorial, speaking to Mark, the nervous supervisor who'd bent to her will. "She's trouble," Lisa muttered, her words barely audible over the engine's hum. "We need to do something before she causes a real problem." Mark shifted uncomfortably, his hands fidgeting with a clipboard, his voice a mumble. "I don't know, Lisa. She's already complained once." Lisa's laugh was sharp, cutting. "Exactly. She won't stop unless we make her." Evelyn's pulse quickened, her ears straining to catch more, but Lisa pulled Mark deeper into the galley, their voices fading into a hiss of plotting. The plane settled into meal service, the scent of roasted chicken and warm bread wafting through the cabin as carts rattled down the aisles. Lisa emerged, her tray loaded with steaming plates, her movements deliberate as she served first class, with exaggerated care. She handed a dish to the businessman in pinstripes, her smile syrupy, then paused near Evelyn's seat, her eyes locking onto her with a cold intensity. Evelyn met her gaze, unflinching, but Lisa turned away, disappearing. Behind the curtain, moments later, Mark shuffled out, his face pale, his hands clutching a small black wallet. He bent toward a woman in a silk scarf 2 rows ahead, his voice trembling. "Ma'am, is this yours?" The woman gasped, patting her purse, her eyes widening. "Yes, it was right here. How did it?" She trailed off, her gaze darting toward Evelyn, suspicion blooming in her expression. Evelyn's stomach twisted as Mark approached her, his clipboard shaking slightly in his grip. "Ma'am," he said, his voice loud enough to carry, "we found this in your bag during a routine check." He held up the wallet, its leather gleaming under the lights, and the cabin erupted in murmurs. "That's not mine," Evelyn said, her tone firm, her hands steady despite the heat rising in her chest. Lisa stepped forward, her smirk barely concealed, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I saw it fall out when you adjusted your purse. I'm sorry, but we can't ignore this." The lie was bold, seamless, and the passengers swallowed it whole. The businessman in pinstripes stood, his face red. "She's a thief. I knew something was off." The woman with the silk scarf clutched her pearls, nodding furiously. "Check her bag again. Who knows what else she's got?" Evelyn opened, her mouth to protest, but Lisa cut her off, her voice rising with authority. "Captain needs to know about this." She spun toward the galley, her heels clicking, and minutes later the captain's voice boomed over the intercom again, clipped and stern. "We've had a report of theft in first class. For everyone's safety, the passenger in question will be restrained until we land. Please remain calm." Before Evelyn could react, Mark and another attendant, a burly man with a buzz cut, flanked her seat, zip ties dangling from their hands. "Ma'am, we need you to cooperate," Mark said, his eyes avoiding hers, his voice a hollow echo of Lisa's command. Evelyn's heart pounded, her mind racing, but she held still as they bound, her wrists, the plastic biting into her skin, her dignity stripped away in front of a cheering crowd. The zip ties tightened, a sharp pinch against her wrists, and Evelyn sat rigid, her breath shallow, her eyes fixed on the tray table. Passengers clapped, a few shouting, "Good job," as Lisa stood nearby, her arms crossed, her smirk now a full grin. The businessman toasted her with his champagne. The woman with the scarf nodded approvingly, and the cabin buzzed with a sick satisfaction. Evelyn's purse lay open on her lap, the wallet planted there like a trophy, a lie so blatant it burned. She'd faced frame-ups before, crooked cops planting evidence in the 60s, but this was personal, a knife twisted by Lisa's hand. "I didn't take anything," she said, her voice low, steady, cutting through the noise. Lisa leaned in, her breath hot against Evelyn's ear. "No one cares what you say. You're done." She straightened, her grin widening, and sauntered back to the galley, leaving Evelyn bound and exposed. The plane hummed on, the engines a steady drone, but the cabin felt like a cage, every eye a bar locking her in. Evelyn's wrists ached, the zip ties rubbing her skin raw, but she kept her face smooth, her breathing even. She'd survived worse, stared down lynch mobs in Alabama, and she wouldn't break now. Then a small voice pierced the silence. A girl, no older than 10, her braids tied with bright beads, standing in the aisle. "This ain't right," she said, her tone firm, her eyes wide with a child's clarity. She held up her phone, the screen glowing with shaky footage of Lisa slipping the wallet into Evelyn's bag during the meal service. "I saw her do it!" The girl's mother, a woman with tired eyes and a nurse's badge, yanked her back, whispering, "Hush, baby." But the damage was done. Passengers murmured, heads turning, doubt creeping into their smug certainty. Lisa spun around, her grin vanishing, her face flushing red as she lunged for the girl. "Give me that," she snarled, snatching the phone from her tiny hands. The girl yelped, stumbling back, and Lisa smashed the device against the armrest, the screen shattering with a sickening crack. "It's broken now," Lisa said, her voice trembling with rage, her eyes darting around the cabin. "No proof, no problem." She tossed the wreckage into a trash bin, her hands shaking, her control slipping for the first time. Evelyn watched, her wrists still bound, her heart pounding with a flicker of hope. The girl's courage had cracked Lisa's facade, exposed her lie to anyone paying attention. The mother hugged her daughter close, her face a mask of fear, but her eyes met Evelyn's with a silent promise. Someone had seen the truth. The cabin buzzed louder now, passengers whispering, their cheers fading into unease. "Did she really plant it?" a man in a baseball cap muttered. "That kid seems sure," a woman replied, her voice shaky. Lisa stood near the galley, her posture rigid, her fingers clenched into fists, trying to regain the narrative. She thought she'd won, thought framing Evelyn would bury her, thought smashing the phone would erase the evidence. She was wrong. Evelyn sat still, the zip ties a badge of her resilience, her mind spinning with possibilities. The girl's footage was gone, but the memory lingered, a seed planted in the cabin's collective mind. Lisa had overplayed her hand, And Evelyn knew it. This wasn't the end. It was a pivot, a chance to fight back, and she'd take it, wrists bound or not. Evelyn Carter sat bound in her first-class seat, the zip ties cutting into her wrists, the plastic edges digging raw grooves into her skin. The plane hummed steadily at 35,000 feet, a deceptive calm blanketing the cabin, but the air around her crackled with hostility. Passengers whispered, their eyes darting between her and the shattered remnants of the young girl's phone, now a twisted heap in the galley trash bin. Lisa Hargrove stood near the curtain, her blonde ponytail taut, her uniform pristine, her smirk a jagged slash across her face. She'd smashed the evidence, silenced the child's truth, and thought she'd cemented Evelyn's ruin. The businessman in pinstripes toasted her again, his champagne flute glinting, while the woman with the silk scarf nodded approvingly, her pearls clutched tight. Evelyn kept her gaze forward, her silver hair a beacon under the lights, her breathing steady despite the ache in her arms. She'd survived worse, and she wouldn't break now. The girl with the beaded braids, no more than 10, clung to her mother's side, her eyes red-rimmed but fierce, her small frame trembling with a mix of fear and defiance. Her mother, Tanya, a nurse with a badge pinned to her sweater, hugged her close, her face etched with worry. She'd seen Lisa plant the wallet, watched her daughter capture it, and now bore the weight of that broken phone. Tanya's gaze flicked to Evelyn, a silent apology in her eyes, but then her jaw tightened, her nurse's instincts kicking in. She stood, her voice cutting through the cabin's murmurs like a scalpel. This woman's 75. You've got her tied up like a criminal. She could have circulation issues, a heart episode, anything. Let her go, or you're risking a medical emergency mid-flight. Her tone was firm, clinical, a professional wielding facts against Lisa's chaos. Lisa spun around, her smirk faltering, her hands balling into fists. "She's a thief," she snapped, her voice loud enough to carry. "She's a safety risk. The captain said—" Tanya cut her off, stepping forward, her sweater brushing the aisle seat. "I'm a nurse. I know the signs. Her wrists are swelling. You want a lawsuit? Or worse, a death on this plane?" The words landed hard, passengers shifting uneasily, their smug cheers fading into doubt. The captain emerged from the cockpit, a stocky man with graying hair and a furrowed brow, his uniform crisp, but his expression wary. He'd heard the theft claim, issued the restraint order, but Tanya's warning hit a nerve. "What's this about?" he barked, his eyes darting between Tanya and Evelyn. Tanya pointed to Evelyn's wrists, the red marks visible even from a distance. "Look at her. She's elderly, restrained for no reason. This isn't safe." The captain hesitated, his gaze lingering on Evelyn's calm face, her bound hands, the faint tremor in her fingers. He'd trusted Lisa's report, but lawsuits loomed large in his mind, headlines flashing of an airline killing a passenger mid-flight. "Cut her loose," he ordered, his voice gruff, nodding to Mark, who hovered nearby, his clipboard clutched like a shield. Mark fumbled with a pocket knife, his hand shaking as he sliced through the zip ties, the plastic snapping with a sharp pop. Evelyn flexed her wrists, rubbing the raw skin, her breath easing as the pressure lifted. "Thank you," she said, her voice smooth, her eyes locking onto Tanya's with gratitude. Tanya nodded back, a quiet alliance forming, her daughter peeking out with a small triumphant smile. Evelyn settled into her seat, the leather cool against her palms, a flicker of relief warming her chest. She'd been freed, her dignity restored, if only for a moment. She thought she'd found a foothold, a chance to breathe. She was wrong. Lisa stood near the galley, her arms crossed, her face a mask of barely contained rage. She'd lost this round, forced to watch Evelyn's restraints fall, but her eyes burned with a promise of retaliation. The captain retreated to the cockpit, Mark scurried off, and the cabin settled into a tense quiet, passengers sipping drinks, their whispers softening. Evelyn leaned back, her purse on her lap, her mind racing. Tanya's courage had turned the tide, cracked Lisa's grip, and Evelyn felt a spark of safety, a fleeting sense she could endure this flight. The girl's bravery, Tanya's stand, they'd given her a lifeline. She closed her eyes, picturing Nathan's face, his steady voice promising action. Her phone buzzed again, his name flashing, and she glanced at it, a text glowing. "I'm here when you land." She smiled faintly, a thread of hope weaving through her exhaustion. The plane droned on, the hum of the engines a steady pulse, the cabin lights dimming as landing neared. Evelyn sipped water Mark had brought, her wrists still throbbing, but her spirit buoyed. She'd survived the frame-up, the zip ties, Lisa's, venom, and now had allies. The announcement came, the captain's voice crackling overhead. "Folks, we're 30 minutes from Los Angeles. Prepare for descent." Passengers shifted, trays stowed, belts clicked, a routine rhythm settling, and Evelyn thought she'd made it, thought Lisa's claws had dulled. Then Lisa emerged from the galley, her posture stiff, her eyes locked on the captain's door. She knocked, slipped inside, and minutes later, the intercom buzzed again, the captain's tone colder, sharper. "We've received updated information. The passenger in 2A is now classified as a security threat based on prior disruptive behavior. Airport police will meet us at the gate. Remain seated." Evelyn's heart sank, her hands tightening around her purse, the water glass trembling on her tray. Passengers gasped, heads turning, the businessman muttering, "Told you she was trouble." The woman with the silk scarf clutched her armrest, her eyes wide. Tanya shot to her feet again, her voice rising. "What behavior? She's been sitting here," but the captain's door stayed shut. Lisa stepping out with a smirk that could cut glass. She'd spun her lie again, twisted the turbulence, the theft, into a threat too big to ignore. Evelyn's brief reprieve shattered, the cabin turning, hostile once more. She met Lisa's gaze, her own eyes steady, refusing to flinch. Lisa thought she'd won, thought police at the gate would bury Evelyn. She didn't know Nathan was waiting too. The plane descended, the lights of Los Angeles, sparkling below, a sprawling grid of promise and peril. Evelyn sat still, her wrists free but her spirit caged, the weight of Lisa's latest strike pressing down. Tanya sat back, her daughter whispering, "Why are they doing this?" Tanya hushed her, but her eyes burned with frustration, locked on Evelyn's. The cabin buzzed with anticipation, passengers craning to see her, their whispers a chorus of judgment. Evelyn's phone buzzed again, Nathan's text glowing. "I'm here." She clung to it, a lifeline in the storm. But the fleece loomed larger, Lisa's trap tightening. She'd been freed, yes, but only to fall into a deeper pit. Lisa stood near the front, her grin a beacon of triumph, certain she'd crushed Evelyn for good. The plane's wheels kissed the runway, a soft jolt signaling the end of one fight and the start of another. "Hey folks, what's your take on this? Twist?" Comment number 1, if you're blown away by Tanya's gutsy stand, risking it all to free Evelyn from those zip ties. Drop number 2, if you're boiling mad at Lisa's slimy move, turning a win into a police trap. Hit that like button if you're rooting for Evelyn to outsmart this nightmare, and subscribe if you're hooked on seeing justice claw its way back. This story's heating up, and we're not letting go until the end. So, what's waiting? At that gate? Will Nathan's presence flip the script? Or has Lisa's venom poisoned the ground Evelyn's about to walk on? Can a mother and son turn this ambush into a reckoning? Or is the law about to tighten the noose Lisa's tied? Buckle up, because the landing's just the beginning. The plane jolted to a stop at Los Angeles International Airport, the wheels grinding against the tarmac, a faint screech echoing through the cabin as the engines whined down. Evelyn Carter sat in her first-class seat, her wrists free but bruised. The red marks a stark contrast against her dark skin. The cabin buzzed with anticipation, passengers unbuckling belts, reaching for bags, their eyes darting toward her with a mix of fear and disdain. The captain's last announcement hung heavy, branding her a security threat, and Lisa Hargrove's smirk glowed like a beacon near the galley, her blonde ponytail swinging as she adjusted her uniform. Evelyn's phone rested in her lap. Nathan's text, "I'm here," a lifeline she clung to, but the promise of police at the gate loomed larger, a shadow swallowing her brief reprieve. She smoothed her coffee-stained slacks, her silver hair catching the cabin lights, her face a mask of calm despite the storm inside. The jet bridge hissed into place, the door swinging open, and two uniformed officers stepped aboard, their boots thudding against the floor, their faces grim under peaked caps. The taller one, a broad-shouldered man with a buzz cut, scanned the cabin, his radio crackling as he barked, "Evelyn Carter, seat 2A, step forward." Evelyn rose, her movements slow, deliberate, her purse clutched tight, her loafers tapping softly as she faced them. Passengers gawked, phones snapping up, screens glowing as they filmed her every move. Lisa strode forward, her heels clicking, her voice loud with fake concern. "That's her. She's been a problem all flight. Theft, disruption, you name it." The officers didn't hesitate, grabbing Evelyn's arms, their grips iron tight, and yanked her toward the exit, her dignity dragged through the aisle like a rag. The jet bridge was a blur of cold metal and stale air, the officers' boots pounding a rhythm that matched Evelyn's racing pulse. Lisa trailed behind, her smirk widening, her eyes glinting with triumph as they emerged into the terminal. A crowd had gathered at Gate 37, travelers pausing mid-stride, their luggage forgotten as they stared. Phones flashed, voices murmured, and Evelyn felt the weight of every lens, every whisper stripping her bare. The officers shoved her forward, handcuffs clinking as they snapped them onto her wrists, the steel colder than the zip ties, biting deeper into her already raw skin. "You're detained for questioning," the shorter officer grunted, his badge reading Perez, his tone flat, mechanical. Evelyn didn't resist, her head high, her gaze steady. But inside, her heart thundered, decades of resilience tested in this public crucible. Then Nathan Carter burst through the crowd, his navy suit sharp against the terminal's chaos, his 6-foot frame cutting a path like a blade. At 42, he carried the quiet authority of the airline's CEO, his jaw tight, his eyes blazing, as he spotted his mother in cuffs. "Let her go!" he roared, his voice booming over the murmurs, his hand flashing a badge only he could wield. "Nathan Carter, CEO of this airline. This is my mother, and you're making a mistake." The officers froze, Perez's hand hovering over his radio, the taller one loosening his grip on Evelyn's arm. Passengers gasped, phones tilting toward Nathan, the scene exploding into a frenzy of clicks and shouts. "CEO?" a woman in a red coat whispered, her video rolling. "That's her son?" a man with a roller bag echoed, his screen capturing every second. Lisa's face drained of color, her smirk collapsing into a slack-jawed stare, her hands twitching at her sides. She hadn't seen this coming, hadn't factored Nathan into her vicious game. And now he stood there, a wall of power she couldn't climb. The officers exchanged a glance, uncertainty flickering, and Nathan pressed forward, his voice low, lethal. "Release her now, or I'll have your badges on my desk by morning." Perez hesitated, then nodded, unlocking the cuffs with a reluctant clink, the steel falling away as Evelyn rubbed her wrists, her composure unbroken. She stepped toward Nathan, her loafers steady, her eyes meeting his with a flicker of relief. He pulled her close, his arm a shield around her shoulders, his breath hot with fury. "You're safe now, Mom, I've got this." But Lisa wasn't done. She shoved through the crowd, her uniform wrinkled now, her voice rising in a desperate pitch as reporters swarmed, their mics thrusting forward like spears. "Wait! She assaulted me mid-flight. She's dangerous!" she cried, her hands flailing, her eyes wild with a liar's panic. "I had to protect the passengers. Check the footage. Ask anyone." The reporters scribbled, cameras rolled, and passengers from the flight nodded, their phones already uploading. Clips captioned "Thief Caught" and "First-Class Fraud." Evelyn's stomach sank, her brief freedom souring as Lisa's lie took root. Nathan's grip tightened, his voice a growl. "That's a damn lie, and I'll prove it." But the damage spread fast. Videos hitting the web, headlines screaming, "Elderly woman attacks crew on flight." The terminal buzzed with chaos, travelers clustering, their voices a rising tide of judgment. She looked shady from the start, a man in a hoodie muttered, his phone replaying Lisa's staged theft claim. "Assault? No wonder they cuffed her," a woman with a stroller agreed, her video looping the captain's threat warning. Evelyn stood beside Nathan, her suit stained, her wrists scarred, her legacy trashed in real time. Nathan pulled out his phone, dialing lawyers, his voice sharp with commands. "Sue for defamation. Get every recording from that flight, now." He turned to Evelyn, his eyes softening. "We'll fix this, Mom. They'll pay." But the crowd didn't care, their screens glowing with Lisa's narrative, Evelyn's name a hashtag of shame trending nationwide. Lisa slipped back, her smirk flickering back to life as the reporters chased her, her story gaining traction. She'd lost the cuffs, yes, but she'd flipped the script, turned Nathan's rescue into a public lynching. Evelyn felt the weight of every stare, every post, a lifetime of fighting racism crashing into this moment of manufactured disgrace. She'd faced mobs before, stood tall against slurs and stones, but this was a new beast, a digital gallows built by Lisa's hands. Nathan's arm stayed firm around her, his jaw set, his mind racing with counterattacks, but the terminal spun with noise, the truth drowned by the roar of lies. "We're not done," he whispered, his voice a vow, but Evelyn's heart ached, her name smeared across a million screens, her dignity a casualty of Lisa's war. The airport lights glared overhead, the hum of baggage claim a distant drone. As the crowd thickened, phones flashing like a swarm of fireflies. Evelyn stood still, her purse clutched tight, her silver hair a crown against the chaos. She'd been freed, yes, but only to be shackled by Lisa's venom, a public humiliation, sharper than any cuffs. Nathan's lawyers were on the move, his power a shield, but the damage was done, the world watching her fall. Lisa lingered near a newsstand, her eyes glinting with a sick glee, certain she'd buried Evelyn in shame. She didn't see the fire, in Nathan's gaze, the steel in Evelyn's spine. This wasn't over. The terminal pulsed with life, a stage for Lisa's triumph. But Evelyn knew stages could turn, and she'd played on tougher ones before. Evelyn Carter stood beside Nathan in the bustling Los Angeles International Airport terminal, the hum of rolling suitcases and distant announcements, a faint backdrop to the chaos still swirling around her. Her wrists bore the faint bruises of handcuffs, her navy suit stained with coffee, her silver hair slightly mussed, but her posture unyielding. Nathan's arm rested on her shoulder, a protective anchor, his navy suit crisp despite the fray, his jaw clenched as he barked orders into his phone. "Suspend her now. Full investigation. I want it on my desk by morning," he snapped, his voice a low growl, his eyes blazing with the fury of a CEO scorned. The crowd had thinned, travelers drifting toward baggage claim, but phones still glowed, videos of Evelyn's assault racking up views, her name a trending smear across the internet. Lisa Hargrove lingered near a gate sign, her blonde ponytail swaying, her smirk a thin veneer over a flicker of unease. She'd turned the terminal into her stage, but Nathan's presence had shifted the spotlight. Back at Airline headquarters, 38 floors up in a sleek LA tower, Nathan wasted no time. He strode into his office the next morning, Evelyn at his side, her loafers tapping a steady rhythm against the marble floor. The room smelled of leather and coffee, floor-to-ceiling windows framing a city still buzzing with her disgrace. He slammed a folder onto his desk, the thud echoing, and announced to his team, "Lisa Hargrove is suspended, effective immediately. We're digging into every second of that flight." Evelyn settled into a chair, her purse on her lap, her hands folded, her face calm but her eyes sharp. She'd agreed to testify via video, a laptop glowing in front of her as she recounted the boarding snub, the coffee spill, the wallet frame-up, her voice steady, cutting through the static of lies. "I paid for first class. She forced me out, attacked me, set me up. That's the truth," she said, her words a blade honed by decades of legal battles. Nathan nodded, his team scribbling notes, the room humming with purpose. She thought justice was close, thought Lisa's suspension would crack the case wide open. She was wrong. Lisa didn't slink away. She had allies, a shadow network flexing its muscle. Greg Tanner, a burly ex-cop turned union rep with a buzz cut and a sneer, sat in a dimly lit bar across town, his thick fingers tapping a beer bottle. He'd worked with Lisa before, shared her disdain for certain types, and now he saw an opening. He leaked doctored footage to a local news outlet, grainy clips showing Evelyn lunging at Lisa mid-flight, her arm outstretched in a frame edited to look like violence. It was a lie stitched together with cheap software, but it spread like wildfire, hitting screens nationwide by noon. "Passenger attacks crew," blared headlines, the video looping on every channel, Evelyn's face frozen in a snarl that never happened. Protests erupted outside the airline's HQ, a mob of 50 chanting, "Fire the fraud," their signs waving, their voices a roar that rattled the glass tower. Nathan stormed into a boardroom, his tie loosened, his fists clenched as he faced the airline's directors, a dozen gray suits around a polished table. "This is garbage," he said, slamming the leaked clip on a screen, the fake lunge playing, in silence. "She's my mother and she's innocent. We're suing for defamation." But the board shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting, their voices low. "Nathan, the PR's a nightmare," a balding man named Vickers muttered, his glasses fogging with sweat. "Stock's down 10%. The public thinks she's guilty." Another, a woman with a tight bun, leaned forward, her tone icy. "We can't have a CEO's family dragging us down. Fire her, or we'll vote you out." Nathan's face hardened, his voice a whip. "She's not an employee. She's a passenger we failed. You want me out? Try it." The room fell silent, tension thick as tar, but the threat lingered, a noose tightening around his neck. Evelyn watched from her hotel room, a modest suite Nathan had booked her near the airport, the TV flickering with her distorted image. She sat on the edge of the bed, her purse beside her, her hands clasped, her heart sinking as the protests grew louder, their chants audible through the window. She'd testified, laid out the truth, thought Nathan's power would shield her. But Lisa's counterstrike had flipped the board, turned her son's empire against her. Her legacy, 40 years of fighting for justice, crumbled under the weight of a lie she couldn't disprove. The phone rang, Nathan's voice tight on the line. "Mom, we're hitting back. Stay strong." She nodded, her voice steady. "I always do." But the screen showed her as a villain, a fraud, and the world believed it. Lisa strutted into a disciplinary hearing 2 days later, her suspension lifted, her uniform pressed, her smirk back in full force. Greg's leak had worked, the board caving under public pressure, reinstating her with a slap on the wrist. She faced a panel of 3, her union rep at her side, his meaty hand patting her shoulder as she spun her tail. "I was protecting the flight. She's unstable, dangerous. Look at the footage," she said, her voice smooth, her eyes glinting with a victor's glee. The panel nodded, their faces blank, their decision already made. "Cleared for duty," the chairwoman announced, her gavel tapping a hollow victory. Lisa walked out, her heels clicking, her head high, certain she'd buried Evelyn's name in the mud. Nathan's investigation stalled, the board's threat looming, and Evelyn's hotel TV blared her defeat. Protesters cheering Lisa's return. The city pulsed outside, horns blaring, lights flashing. But Evelyn sat still, her hands trembling slightly, her mind racing. She'd fought Lisa's frame-up, won her freedom at the gate, thought Nathan's suspension would end it. But Greg's dirty trick had turned her into a pariah. Her legacy, her son's career, teetered on a razor's edge, Lisa's lie a sledgehammer smashing both. Nathan burst into her room, his suit rumpled, his eyes wild. "They're cowards, Mom. The board's folding, but I'm not. We'll sue. Expose the edit. Fight this." Evelyn met his gaze, her voice low, resolute. "I know, son, but she's winning now." The TV looped the fake lunge, her face twisted in a lie, and the chants outside grew louder, a mob baying for her blood. The hotel window framed a skyline indifferent to her pain, the protests a dull roar below. Evelyn stood smoothing her stained suit, her silver hair a crown against the storm. She'd testified, trusted Nathan's power, thought justice would prevail, but Lisa's allies had turned the airline against her, her victory at the gate a distant memory. Greg's leak was a masterstroke, a fabricated assault no one questioned, and the board's betrayal cut deeper than Lisa's smirk. Nathan paced, his phone buzzing with lawyer updates, his fight unbroken. But Evelyn felt the weight of a world that saw her as guilty, her name a hashtag of hate. Lisa had flipped the script, turned her son's empire into her weapon, and Evelyn's legacy dangled by a thread, shredded by a lie she couldn't yet unmask. Evelyn Carter stepped out of the airline's disciplinary hearing, her navy suit still stained, her silver hair pulled tight into a bun, her wrists aching from the ghosts of handcuffs. The Los Angeles afternoon sun blazed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the corporate plaza, the air thick with exhaust and the distant hum of traffic. Nathan walked beside her, his navy suit wrinkled, his jaw set, his arm a steady brace as they moved toward a waiting car. Lisa Hargrove's reinstatement had hit like a gut punch. Her smirk burned into Evelyn's mind. The board's betrayal, a fresh wound. Protesters swarmed the building's base, 100 strong now, their signs stabbing the air. Fire the fraud, and no thugs in the sky. Their chants roared, a wall of sound crashing against her, and Evelyn felt the weight of every lie Lisa had spun, her legacy shredded by a mob fed on Greg's doctored footage. She'd fought for justice her whole life, thought Nathan's power would shield her, but now she faced a gauntlet of hate. The crowd spotted her, their voices surging into a feral howl, faces twisted with rage as they surged forward. "There! She is!" a man in a trucker hat bellowed, his sign swinging like a club. "Get her!" a woman with dyed red hair screamed, her phone filming, her eyes wild. Nathan shoved Evelyn behind him, his 6-foot frame a wall, his voice booming. "Back off! She's done nothing!" But the mob didn't care, their fury unleashed by Lisa's lies, their hands clutching bottles, rocks, anything they could hurl. A glass bottle sailed through the air, shattering at Evelyn's feet, shards skittering across the pavement, and she flinched, her loafers crunching glass, her pulse racing. Nathan grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the car, but the crowd closed in, a human tide of venom, their slurs cutting deeper than the debris. "Thief! Liar! Go back where you came from!" A brick flew next, a jagged blur arcing from the mob's core, and Nathan couldn't dodge it in time. It grazed Evelyn's head, a searing jolt exploding above her temple, blood trickling warm down her cheek. She stumbled, her vision swimming, her knees buckling as Nathan caught her, his arms a cradle against the chaos. "Mom, stay with me," he shouted, his voice raw, his eyes wide with panic as he dragged her toward the car. The mob cheered, a sick roar of triumph, bottles raining down, one smashing against Nathan's shoulder, another cracking the car's windshield. He shoved Evelyn inside, slamming the door, and leaped into the driver's seat, tires screeching as he peeled away, the crowd's fists pounding the hood, their faces a blur of hate fading in the rear view. Evelyn slumped against the leather, her head throbbing, blood staining her collar, her breath ragged. Nathan gripped the wheel, his knuckles white, his voice trembling. "You're okay, Mom. We're out. Hospital's 5 minutes." She nodded weakly, her hand pressing the wound, the pain a dull roar beneath her resolve. The car sped through, LA's streets, horns blaring, lights flashing, and within minutes, they pulled into an ER bay, medics rushing out with a stretcher. Evelyn waved it off, walking in herself, her loafers steady despite the dizziness, her purse clutched tight. Doctors swarmed, stitching her scalp, 4 neat sutures closing the gash, their voices calm as they stabilized her. She woke hours later, in a private room, the beeping of monitors a soft rhythm. Nathan at her bedside, his suit jacket off, his eyes red-rimmed but fierce. "I'm ending this," he vowed, his hand squeezing hers. "Lisa's done." Evelyn sat up, her head bandaged, her suit replaced by a hospital gown, her voice low but steel. "I'm not finished either, son. We fight." She'd survived the mob, thought the hospital was a reprieve, thought Nathan's rage would turn the tide. She was wrong. The door burst open, 4 cops storming in, their boots thudding, their badges glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Evelyn Carter!" the lead officer barked, a wiry man with a scar on his cheek. "You're under arrest for inciting a riot." Nathan shot to his feet, his voice a thunderclap. "What the hell? She's the victim." The officer shrugged, cuffs dangling. "Witnesses say she started it. We've got orders." Evelyn's heart sank, her brief recovery shattered. The mob's chaos pinned on her by Lisa's unseen hand. Nathan's lawyers flooded in, a trio in sharp suits, their voices overlapping as they argued jurisdiction, demanded evidence, stalled the arrest. "She's injured, just attacked. This is harassment," one shouted, his briefcase slamming onto a table. The cops hesitated, radios crackling, and stepped back, the cuffs unclicked for now. Evelyn sat still, her bandaged head high, her eyes burning with a fire that hadn't dimmed. Lisa's revenge had escalated, turning a brick to the skull into a rap sheet, her allies twisting the mob's violence into Evelyn's crime. Nathan paced, his phone buzzing with updates, his fury a live wire. "Greg's behind this. I know. It," he growled, his mind racing to counter the setup. Evelyn nodded, her voice steady. "He's her muscle. She won't stop." The TV flickered on, a nurse flipping channels, and Lisa's face filled the screen, her uniform pristine, her voice smug in a live interview. "That woman's a thug," she said, her eyes glinting, her words a poison drip. "She incited that riot, endangered everyone. I'm just glad I'm back to keep flights safe." The anchor nodded, the ticker screaming. "Flight attendant. Hero slams violent passenger." Evelyn's blood ran cold, her name trashed again, the hospital room a cage closing in. She'd survived the mob, thought Nathan's vow would shift the fight, but Lisa's counterstrike was ruthless, pinning the attack on her, her legacy bleeding out on live TV. Nathan muted the set, his fist clenched, his voice a vow. "She's lying through her teeth. We'll prove it." But the cops lingered outside, their shadows dark through the glass, Lisa's trap tightening. The hospital hummed with sterile quiet, the city sprawling beyond the window, indifferent to Evelyn's war. She sat propped against pillows, her bandaged, head a badge of survival, her hands steady despite the ache. She'd faced the mob, thought the stitches would mark the end of Lisa's reign, but Greg's move had flipped the script, turned her into the villain again. Nathan stood by her, his suit rumpled, his fight unbroken, but the TV's lies echoed, Lisa's gloating a dagger in her chest. The cops waited, the arrest delayed but looming, and Evelyn knew this wasn't over. Lisa had turned her pain into a weapon, and the fight was spiraling into darker territory. "Hey folks, how's this hitting you?" Comment number 1. If you're stunned by Nathan shielding Evelyn from that mob, taking hits to save her, drop. Number 2. If you're furious at Lisa pinning the riot on her, twisting survival into a crime, hit that like button if you're rooting for this mother-son duo to smash through the lies, and subscribe if you're locked in for their comeback. This story's a roller coaster, and we're riding it to the end. So, what's Lisa's next play after this brutal setup? Will Evelyn's hospital bed become her prison, or can Nathan's lawyers outmaneuver Greg's dirty cop tricks? How deep does this conspiracy run when the mob's blood is on her hands? Stay tuned, because the stakes are about to explode. Evelyn Carter lay in her hospital bed, the sterile white sheets cool against her skin, the bandage on her head a tight crown over 4 fresh stitches. The Los Angeles skyline glimmered beyond the window, a sprawl of lights indifferent to the chaos consuming her. Nathan stood by her side, his navy suit rumpled, his jaw clenched, his phone pressed to his ear as he barked orders to lawyers still staving off the cops lurking outside. The TV flickered silently, Lisa Hargrove's smug face frozen mid-interview, her words, "She's a thug." A venomous loop that had turned the mob's attack into Evelyn's crime. Her wrists throbbed with phantom cuffs, her silver hair, stark against the pillow, but her eyes burned with a fire honed by decades of battles. She'd survived the brick, the hospital raid, thought Nathan's fight would turn the tide, but Lisa's latest strike had painted her as a riot's architect, her legacy bleeding out on live news. She needed a new play. Nathan hung up, his voice low, urgent. "Mom, we've got a window. The cops are stalled, but not for long. Greg's pushing hard." Evelyn nodded, her mind racing, her lawyer's instincts kicking in. "Then we hit back smarter," she said, her tone steady, her hands folding over her gown. "I'll give them what they want, a surrender, but it's a trap." Nathan's brow furrowed, his eyes searching hers, but he trusted her, nodding slowly. She reached for the hospital phone, dialing a local station, her voice calm as she requested airtime. "I'm Evelyn Carter. I want to speak, clear the air," she said, her words deliberate, a baited hook cast into Lisa's web. The station jumped, scheduling a live call-in within hours, the city buzzing with anticipation. The broadcast crackled. To life at dusk, Evelyn's face on a grainy hospital feed, her bandaged head a stark testament to the mob's fury. Nathan sat beside her, his presence a silent shield, as the anchor's voice boomed. Evelyn Carter addresses the riot charges. Go ahead, ma'am. Evelyn leaned into the mic, her voice smooth, measured, a performance honed by years in court. I'm sorry for the chaos outside that hearing. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. I just wanted my seat on that flight. I'll step back, let this settle, for everyone's sake. The words dripped with regret, a surrender that sounded real. Her eyes downcast, her hands trembling slightly for effect. Nathan's jaw tightened, but he played along, his silence a nod to her plan. The anchor pressed. So you're admitting fault? Evelyn paused, then sighed. I take responsibility for the tension. That's all I'll say. Lisa watched, from her apartment, sprawled on a couch, a beer in hand, her blonde ponytail loose, her smirk widening as the broadcast played. Evelyn's apology was music to her ears. A white flag waved in defeat, and she leaned back, her confidence swelling. She'd crushed her, turned the mob's blood into Evelyn's guilt, and now the old woman was folding on live TV. Greg called, his gruff voice crackling through her phone. She's done. You're golden. Lisa laughed, sharp and triumphant. Told you she'd break, let's celebrate. She thought she'd won, thought Evelyn's retreat was the end, thought her trap had snapped shut. She was wrong. Nathan wasn't idle. While Evelyn played her part, he dug deep, his team scouring records, unearthing Lisa's past. They found gold. 2 prior firings from airlines, one in Dallas, one in Chicago, both for racist outbursts, slurs, to passengers, denied service, buried complaints. He leaked it to a rival news outlet, the documents hitting screens as Evelyn's surrender aired, a 1-2 punch timed to perfection. Flight attendants' racist history exposed, flashed across channels, the clips cutting through Lisa's victory lap. Passengers from those flights spoke up, their voices raw. She called me trash over my skin, a black man said. Refused me a blanket. Said I didn't rate, a Latina woman added. The tide shifted, Lisa's support wavering, her smirk fading as texts flooded her phone, union reps panicking, Greg cursing on the line. The airline reacted fast, Nathan's pressure cracking their spine. Lisa's reinstatement crumbled, a demotion slapped on her record. Back to probation, no flights, a desk job in a basement office. She raged in her apartment, hurling the beer, bottle at the wall, glass shattering as her world tilted. Evelyn's apology had lulled her, made her drop her guard, and Nathan's leak had gutted her. She thought she'd buried them, thought the mob's fury was her crown. But the past she'd hidden roared back, a boomerang she couldn't dodge. Evelyn sat in her hospital bed, the broadcast off, a faint smile tugging her lips as Nathan showed her the headlines. Good work, son, she said, her voice steady, her head high. She'd faked surrender, turned Lisa's arrogance against her, thought this was the knockout. She was wrong again. Greg didn't flinch. He rallied a vigilante crew, a dozen ex-cops and barroom toughs, their fists itching for payback. They tracked Evelyn's home, a modest bungalow in LA's Crenshaw district, its porch lined with potted plants, a sanctuary she'd built after years of struggle. Night fell, the city quiet, and Evelyn returned, discharged from the hospital, her stitches itching, her spirit unbroken. Nathan dropped her off, promising, I'll be back tomorrow, rest. She nodded, stepping inside, the door clicking shut, the air cool with the scent of lavender. She thought the leak had caged Lisa, thought Greg's claws were clipped, thought she'd bought peace. Then headlights flared outside, engines growling, and boots hit her lawn, a shadow army closing in. The first Molotov cocktail crashed through her window, a fiery bloom shattering glass, flames licking the curtains as smoke billowed thick and black. Evelyn jolted awake, her hospital gown swapped for pajamas, her loafers by the bed as she grabbed her purse, coughing through the haze. Another bottle hit the porch, a roar of orange swallowing the plants, the wood crackling as fire spread. She stumbled to the back door, her head throbbing, her lungs burning, the mob's shouts piercing the night. "Burn her out! Finish her!" She kicked the door open, staggering into the yard, the grass wet under her feet, the smoke a choking veil. Sirens wailed in the distance, too far, too slow, and she ran, her silhouette a ghost against the inferno, her home devoured by Greg's wrath. Evelyn collapsed behind a neighbor's shed, her breath ragged, her pajamas singed, her purse clutched tight as flames painted the sky red. The mob cheered, their shadows dancing, Greg's voice a bellow over the chaos. She's done now. Lisa wasn't there, but her fingerprints were, her vengeance channeled through Greg's fire. Evelyn's sanctuary burned, her victory torched, and she crouched low, her mind racing despite the exhaustion. She'd fooled Lisa, exposed her past, thought the demotion was checkmate, but Greg's arson flipped the board, turned her retreat into a fight for survival. Nathan's car screeched back, his headlights cutting the dark, his shout lost in the roar as he raced toward her. The flames roared louder, a testament to Lisa's reach, and Evelyn knew this war was far from over. Evelyn Carter crouched behind the neighbor's shed, her pajamas singed, her silver hair matted with soot, her lungs burning from the smoke of her torched home. The Los Angeles night pulsed with chaos, flames licking the sky where her Crenshaw bungalow once stood, the roar of fire drowning out the distant wail of sirens. Nathan's car screeched to a halt, his headlights slicing through the dark, his voice a raw shout as he leaped out, racing toward her. "Mom, get in!" he yelled, his navy suit streaked with ash, his eyes wild with panic. She stumbled forward, her loafers slipping on wet grass, her purse clutched tight, and he pulled her into the passenger seat, tires spinning as they fled. Greg's vigilante mob cheered behind them, their shadows dancing in the firelight, their Molotov cocktails spent, their victory a blazing ruin. Evelyn had faked surrender, exposed Lisa's past, thought she'd turned the tide. But Greg's arson had flipped it into a nightmare. They drove fast, weaving through back streets, the city a blur of neon and horns. Nathan's knuckles whitened, on the wheel his breath ragged. "We're going underground, I've got a safe house, they won't find us." Evelyn nodded, her head throbbing beneath the stitches, her voice steady despite the ache. "Good. We hit back harder." He glanced at her, his jaw tightening, but he trusted her grit, her plan already forming in the ashes of their escape. The safe house was a nondescript condo in Echo Park, its windows dark, its walls bare, a hideout Nathan kept for emergencies. They slipped inside, the door locking with a heavy thud, the air cool and still. Evelyn sank onto a couch, her pajamas, stiff with soot, her mind racing as Nathan booted up a laptop, his fingers flying over keys. "We broadcast," she said, her tone firm. "Tell the world Lisa's truth." The feed went live at midnight, a shaky stream from the safe house, Evelyn's bandaged head and Nathan's grim face filling the screen. "This is Evelyn Carter," she began, her voice cutting through the static, her eyes piercing the lens. "My home burned tonight because of Lisa Hargrove's lies. She framed me, attacked me, and her allies torched my life. Here's the proof." Nathan clicked files, airing Lisa's racist firings, Dallas, Chicago, letters from passengers, audio of her slurs, a damning mosaic of her past. "She's no hero," he growled, his voice a hammer. "She's a coward hiding behind a uniform." The stream exploded online, views spiking, shares flooding, the city waking to their counterstrike. Evelyn sat back, her hands folded, a flicker of hope igniting. She thought this would bury Lisa, thought the truth would win. She was wrong. Passengers from the flight chimed in, their voices a chorus of support breaking through the digital noise. Tanya, the nurse from Economy, appeared on a local news feed, her tired eyes fierce. "I saw Lisa plant that wallet. She targeted Evelyn from the start. That girl's a racist, plain and simple." The young woman with braids from the plane posted a clip, her voice shaking but clear. "She smashed my phone to hide it. Evelyn didn't steal nothing." More came forward, a man in a baseball cap, a woman with a toddler, each adding weight. Their testimonies a lifeline Evelyn hadn't expected. Social media erupted, hashtags flipping from hate to outrage. "Justice for Evelyn" trended. Protests, Shifting to Lisa's doorstep, the airline's HQ swarmed again, this time demanding her head. Lisa's demotion cracked, her desk job revoked, and Nathan's phone buzzed with board updates. She's fired. For good. Evelyn stood in the safe house, her pajamas swapped for a borrowed sweater, her loafers by the door, her spirit surging, as Nathan grinned. "We did it, Mom. She's out." The TV flickered, news anchors pivoting, Lisa's face fading from hero to villain, the city's anger turning on her. Evelyn emerged at dawn, stepping onto the condo's balcony, the cool air brushing her stitches, her eyes scanning a skyline that felt less hostile. She'd broadcast the truth, rallied the flight's witnesses, thought Lisa's firing was the end game, thought she'd reclaimed her name. Then her phone rang, an unknown number flashing, and she answered, her voice steady. "Yes?" A gravelly laugh crackled through. "Greg's. You think this is over? Check the news." Her heart sank, her hand tightening around the phone as Nathan flipped the TV back on. The screen blared live footage, a grainy feed from a warehouse. Nathan's face bloodied, his navy suit torn, a gun pressed to his temple. Greg loomed behind him, his buzz cut sharp under dim lights, his sneer a jagged slash. "Evelyn Carter," he barked into the camera, his voice a taunt. "Retract every word on live TV or your boy's done." Lisa hovered in the background, her uniform gone, her blonde hair wild, her laugh a manic echo as she paced. Evelyn froze, her breath catching, the safe house's safety shattering. Nathan struggled, his wrists bound, his eyes defiant despite the bruises, a gag muffling his shouts. Greg's crew flanked him, 6 men with bats and knives, their faces shadowed, their intent clear. "You've got 1 hour," Greg said, the feed cutting to black, the news anchor stammering in shock. Evelyn's knees buckled, but she caught herself, her purse tumbling to the floor, her mind spinning. She'd exposed Lisa, turned the public, thought the firing was victory. But Greg had snatched Nathan, turned her counter into a hostage crisis. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking, her stitches throbbing as fear clawed her chest. She'd faced mobs, fires, lies, but this was her son, her rock, his life dangling by Greg's trigger. The safe house walls closed in, the laptop glowing with their broadcast, now a cruel irony. She'd fought Lisa's venom, thought she'd won the war, but Greg's move was a checkmate she hadn't seen. Lisa's cackle a soundtrack to her dread. Nathan's defiance flashed in her mind, his vow to end this, and she straightened, her resolve hardening. She had to save him. The city hummed beyond the balcony, dawn painting the sky gold, but Evelyn's world darkened, Greg's threat a noose around her heart. She paced, her loafers silent on the carpet, her hands trembling as she dialed Nathan's team, her voice a whip. "Find that warehouse. Now." They scrambled, tracing signals, but time ticked, the hour shrinking. Lisa's shadow looming through Greg's gun. Evelyn had rallied the flight, burned Lisa's career, thought she'd reclaimed her ground, but this was deeper, deadlier, a strike at her core. She stared at the blank TV, Nathan's bruised face etched in her vision, her fight pivoting from justice to survival. Lisa had lost her job, but not her venom, and Greg wielded it now, a blade aimed at her son. Evelyn Carter stood in the Echo Park safe house, the dawn light filtering through cracked blinds, her borrowed sweater loose over her singed pajamas, her silver hair a wild halo around her bandaged head. The TV screen lingered black. Greg's threat. "Retract every word or your boy's done." A gunshot still ringing in her ears. Nathan's bruised face, the gun at his temple, Lisa's manic laugh, burned into her mind, a nightmare looped on repeat. Her loafers paced the carpet, her purse spilled on the floor, her hands steady despite the tremor in her chest. She'd exposed Lisa, turned the public, thought she'd won. But Greg's kidnapping had flipped her victory into a desperate race. The clock ticked, 40 minutes left in his hour deadline, and she dialed Tanya, the nurse from the flight, her voice sharp, urgent. "I need help. Nathan's taken. Warehouse live feed. Can you tip the FBI?" Tanya's breath hitched, but she agreed, her tone firm. "I'm on it." Evelyn hung up, her mind racing, her lawyer's cunning weaving a plan through the panic. She'd agree to Greg's demand, go live, stall him with a fake retraction while Tanya's call brought the feds crashing in. Nathan's team traced the feed, pinning the warehouse to an industrial strip near Long Beach, 30 miles south, a rusted sprawl of steel and shadows. She called the station again, her voice steady, a mask of defeat. I'll retract. Live. Now. Patch me to that warehouse feed. The anchor scrambled, the broadcast flickering on, Evelyn's face filling half the screen, Greg's warehouse on the other. Nathan bound and gagged, his eyes defiant, blood streaking his torn suit. Greg loomed, his buzz cut sharp, his gun steady. Lisa pacing behind him, her blonde hair a tangled mess, her grin wild. Start talking, Greg barked, his voice a growl through the feed. Evelyn leaned into the mic, her bandaged head high, her eyes locked on the camera, playing her part. I'm Evelyn Carter. I spoke out against Lisa Hargrove, said she framed me, burned my home. I was wrong, she said, her tone slow, deliberate, stretching every word. The riot, the flight, it was my fault. I stirred trouble, not her. I'm sorry. She paused, her hands folding, her voice trembling just enough to sell it, buying seconds, minutes, her gaze flicking to the clock. 30 minutes left. Greg's sneer softened, his gun dipping slightly, but Lisa lunged forward, her voice a shriek. Louder. Say it like you mean it. Evelyn nodded, repeating, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Her words a molasses drip, her heart pounding as she stalled, praying Tanya's tip had landed. The warehouse feed crackled, Nathan's muffled grunts piercing the silence, his wrists straining against ropes, his eyes darting as Greg's crew, 6 men with bats and knives, shifted restlessly. Lisa paced faster, her laugh a jagged edge, her hands clawing the air. She's done! We've got her! She crowed, her eyes glinting with a manic glee, certain Evelyn's retraction was her crown. Greg nodded, his gun steadying, but his brow furrowed, sensing the drag in her words. Keep going, he snapped, his voice tight, the clock ticking. 20 minutes now. Evelyn leaned closer, her voice slower still. I shouldn't have fought her. The flight was my mistake, my disruption. I take it back, she said, her eyes scanning the screen, her breath held for any sign of rescue, her stalling a tightrope walk over a pit of fire. Then Lisa snapped, her patience fraying, her control slipping. Enough stalling, she screamed, grabbing a pistol from Greg's belt, her hands shaking as she aimed at Evelyn's image on a warehouse TV. Say it's over or I shoot him now. She swung the gun toward Nathan, her finger twitching, her face a mask of rage. Evelyn's heart stopped, her voice rising a desperate pivot. It's over, I'm done, please don't, she cried, her words spilling fast now, her mask cracking as the clock hit 15 minutes. Greg yanked Lisa back, his growl low. She's doing it. Chill. But Lisa's eyes blazed, her gun swinging wildly, and she fired, the shot deafening, the bullet grazing Evelyn's arm on the safehouse screen. A hot streak of pain searing her flesh as she gasped, clutching the wound, blood seeping through her sweater. The safehouse shook with the echo, Evelyn's arm throbbing, her vision blurring, but she stayed upright, her resolve a steel core. Nathan roared through his gag, thrashing against his ropes, his chair rocking as he lunged at Greg, his bound, fists swinging. Greg stumbled, his gun clattering, and Nathan broke free, his adrenaline a wildfire tackling Greg to the concrete floor. The crew froze, bats raised, but Nathan rolled, grabbing Greg's gun, his bloodied hand steady as he aimed. Drop it, he shouted at Lisa, his voice raw, his suit a shredded mess. She spun, her pistol trembling, her laugh choking into a snarl, but before she could fire again, the warehouse doors exploded inward, FBI agents storming in, their vests black, their rifles raised, shouts of freeze, splitting the air. Evelyn watched, her arm bleeding, her breath ragged, the safehouse feed a chaos of motion as agents swarmed, cuffing Greg's crew, their bats clattering to the ground. Lisa dropped her gun, her hands rising, her scream a banshee wail. I'm the victim. She framed me, she shrieked, her blonde hair wild, her eyes darting as agents grabbed her, steel snapping around her wrists. Nathan staggered to his feet, his face bruised, his gun lowered as an agent clapped his shoulder, pulling him clear. Greg thrashed, his buzz cut, matted with sweat, his curses muffled as cuffs locked him down. The feed cut, the anchor stammering, "We've got a rescue in progress." But Evelyn sank back, her arm pulsing, her victory a jagged edge against the pain. The safe house fell silent, the laptop glowing with static, the city waking beyond the blinds. Evelyn pressed her hand to the wound, blood staining her fingers, her loafers scuffing the floor as she steadied herself. She'd agreed to retract, stalled Greg, tipped the FBI through Tanya, thought she'd saved Nathan, and she had. The agents had crashed in, Lisa's reign shattered, Greg's trap sprung back on him. She'd faced the gun, taken the graze, watched her son fight free, and now they were safe. Nathan's voice crackled through her phone minutes later, hoarse but alive. "Mom, I'm okay, they're done." She nodded, her voice a whisper. "Good, son, good." The fight had peaked, a shootout and rescue capping Lisa's terror, and Evelyn thought it was over, her last stand won. The room spun slightly, her arm a dull ache, the adrenaline fading into exhaustion as she sank onto the couch, her purse beside her, her silver hair a testament to survival. She'd played Greg's game, turned Lisa's mania against her, brought the law crashing down, and saved her son. The warehouse chaos replayed in her mind, Nathan's tackle, Lisa's scream, the cuffs clicking, a brutal end to a brutal war. She'd broadcast truth, faced fire, thought she'd buried them, and now they were cuffed, their venom drained. The city hummed outside, a new day breaking, and Evelyn closed her eyes, her breath slowing, her fight etched in every scar. Lisa had lost, Greg too, and Nathan was free. Her last stand a bloody triumph she'd clawed from the jaws of defeat. Evelyn Carter slumped on the safe house couch, her borrowed sweater soaked with blood from the graze on her arm, the sting a sharp pulse beneath her fading adrenaline. The Los Angeles dawn crept through the blinds, casting slivers of gold across the room, the laptop flickering with static from the warehouse raid's aftermath. Nathan's voice had crackled through her phone minutes ago. "I'm okay, they're done." A lifeline pulling her from the edge, his rescue a bloody triumph she'd clawed from Greg's trap. Her silver hair hung loose, her bandaged head throbbed, her loafers scuffed the carpet as she shifted, her purse a silent sentinel beside her. Lisa Hargrove and Greg Tanner were cuffed, their reign of terror shattered by the FBI's storm, and Evelyn thought she'd won. Thought her last stand had buried them. She was wrong. She had one more card to play, a secret she'd held since the flight began. Nathan burst through the door, his navy suit torn, his face bruised, blood crusted on his cheek from Greg's fists. But his eyes blazed with a victor's fire. He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands gentle as he checked her arm, his voice hoarse. "Mom, you're hurt. We need a medic." She waved him off, her grip firm on his wrist, her voice steady despite the pain. "I'm fine, son. But we're not done." He frowned, his brow creasing, but she reached into her purse, her fingers closing around a small recorder, its black casing scratched from the chaos of her escape. "I taped it all," she said, her eyes locking onto his, a spark igniting in the dim room. "Every threat, every lie, from the flight to the fire, including Greg's cop ties." Nathan's jaw dropped, his breath catching as she pressed play. Lisa's voice hissing through the static. "She doesn't belong here. Never will." The recorder spun a tale of venom, snippets from the flight. Lisa's coffee spill taunt, her wallet frame-up whisper, her turbulence lie to the captain, layered, with Greg's growls from the hospital raid and warehouse feed. "Cops owe me. She's ours." Evelyn had slipped it into her purse on the plane, a habit from her lawyer days, capturing every move Lisa and Greg made, a hidden ace she'd guarded through mob attacks and flames. Nathan's eyes widened, his mind racing as the tape rolled, a damning reel of their crimes, tying Greg to a corrupt precinct, exposing a web deeper than Lisa's racism. "This changes everything," he said, his voice a vow, his hands trembling with the weight of her gambit. She nodded, her silver hair glinting, her resolve a steel thread. "Take it to the board. Finish them." Nathan moved fast, his team, converging on Airline HQ, The recorder's contents a grenade lobbed into the tower's core. By noon, the boardroom was a war zone. Directors in gray suits sweating as Nathan played the tape. Lisa's sneers and Greg's threats booming through. Speakers, their faces paling with every word. Vickers, the balding man who'd pushed to fire Evelyn, slumped in his chair, his glasses slipping, his voice a croak. "We didn't know." The woman with the tight bun stood, her icy facade cracking, her resignation letter sliding across the table. "We're done," she muttered, her heels clicking as she fled. Within hours, the board collapsed, 6 resigning in disgrace, their complicity in Lisa's reinstatement a stain they couldn't scrub. Nathan seized control, his voice a thunderclap at an emergency meeting. "My mother's taking over, interim, CEO, effective now." Evelyn stepped into the role, her arm bandaged, her suit replaced with a crisp blazer, her loafers tapping marble as she entered the office she'd never sought. The city buzzed below, the airline stock reeling, but steadying under Nathan's iron grip, her appointment a shockwave rippling through newsrooms. She sat at the desk, her silver hair a crown, her eyes scanning reports as Nathan briefed her, his pride a quiet glow. "You flipped it, Mom. They're gone, and you're here." She smiled faintly, her voice low. "Not about me, son. About fixing this." She'd turned victimhood into power, her recorder a sword that beheaded the board, Lisa's trap a ladder to the top. The reversal was complete, her legacy not just salvaged but elevated, a black woman running the airline that tried to break her. Lisa watched from a jail cell, her blonde hair tangled, her uniform swapped for orange, a grainy TV bolted to the wall airing Evelyn's inauguration. The news ticker screamed, "Evelyn Carter named CEO after exposing corruption," her bandaged arm a badge, her speech a clarion call. Lisa's smirk vanished, her hands clawing the bars, her scream a wail of disbelief. "No! That's my job!" she shrieked, her voice echoing off concrete, her world inverted. She'd targeted Evelyn, burned her home, aimed to bury her, thought Greg's gun would seal it, but now Evelyn ruled the empire she'd torched, her loss absolute, her venom a boomerang slicing her own throat. Greg sat in a neighboring cell, his buzz cut bowed, his cop allies raided, his power ash in Evelyn's wake. Evelyn's voice filled the broadcast, steady, resonant, her blazer sharp against the podium's gleam. "This airline failed me, failed you, with racism woven into its bones. I've faced slights, mobs, fire, bullets, but I'm here to dismantle that system," she said, her eyes piercing the camera, her scars a testament to every fight. "No one's seat, no one's dignity will be stolen again." The room erupted, staff clapping, passengers from the flight, Tanya, the girl with braids, watching from homes, their nods a quiet victory. Nathan stood behind her, his suit pressed, his bruises fading, his mother's rise a crown he'd helped forge. She'd turned Lisa's war into her platform, Greg's threats into her throne, her last stand a launchpad to reshape the future. The city hummed beyond the tower, dusk painting the sky crimson, the airline's logo a beacon under her command. Evelyn sat back, her arm aching, her stitches itching, her loafers crossed beneath the desk, her purse a relic of survival. She'd broadcast truth, faced death. Thought she'd just save Nathan, but the recorder had flipped the game, toppling a board, jailing her foes, landing her here. Lisa's cell TV looped her speech, her orange jumpsuit a shackle, her realization a slow bleed. Evelyn didn't just win, she ruled. Greg's precinct crumbled, his allies cuffed, his empire dust. Evelyn's legacy soared, not as victim, but victor. Her scars a map of a war she'd turned inside out. The office settled into quiet. Papers rustling, phones buzzing with a company reborn. Evelyn sipped tea, her hands steady, her silver hair catching the light, her mind already charting reforms. She'd survived the flight, the mob, the fire, the gun. Thought each was the end, but each was a step to this desk, this power, this reversal no one saw coming. Nathan leaned in, his voice soft. "You did it, Mom." They never stood a chance. She met his gaze, her smile faint, fierce. "We did it, son. Together." The city sprawled below, a new day breaking, and Evelyn reigned, her throne built from the ashes of Lisa's hate, her victory a shockwave that rewrote the rules. Evelyn Carter's journey in racist flight attendant harasses elderly black woman, unaware her son is the airline CEO, offers profound lessons in resilience, strategy, and the power of truth. First, it shows that enduring systemic racism demands unyielding strength. Evelyn faced relentless attacks, denied seats, scalding coffee, false arrests, mobs, and arson, yet her composure never wavered, proving that inner fortitude can outlast external hate. Her story teaches us to stand firm, even when the world turns against you. Second, it highlights the value of cunning over confrontation. Evelyn's fake surrender and secret recordings flipped the script on Lisa and Greg, turning their aggression into their downfall. This underscores that intelligence, not just defiance, can dismantle oppression. Third, it reveals the ripple effect of collective support. Tanya's courage, the passengers' testimonies, and Nathan's loyalty amplified Evelyn's fight, showing that allies can turn a solo battle into a movement. Finally, the shocking reversal. Evelyn rising as CEO demonstrates that justice, though delayed, can triumph spectacularly, reshaping power from the ashes of pain. These lessons aren't just Evelyn's, they're ours. Racism thrives in silence, but persistence, strategy, and community can uproot it. Evelyn didn't just survive, she rewrote the narrative, proving that victims can become victors. So, what's your take? How do you fight when the odds stack high? Comment below with your thoughts, hit like if Evelyn's grit inspires you, subscribe for more tales of triumph over tyranny, and share to spark this conversation wider. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride. May you find your own strength to rise above the storms.